the invisible hand a silver tray in Meredith Okafor's hands reflected the chandelier's light as she weaved between tuxedos and evening gowns. At 35 she had mastered the art of invisibility required of household staff at Thornwood Estate. 6 years of employment had taught her to anticipate needs before they arose, to fade into the background of wealth and privilege while keeping everything immaculate. "More champagne, please," called a woman in emerald silk, barely glancing at Meredith. With a practiced smile, Meredith offered the tray, her white-gloved hands steady despite 12 hours already on her feet. Thornwood Estate stood as a monument to old money in Greenwich, Connecticut. The mansion's current owner, Theodore Blackwell, inherited the property from his grandfather who had made a fortune in railroads. Tonight's fundraiser attracted the elite of the financial world: bankers, hedge fund managers, and venture capitalists, mingling beneath crystal chandeliers that Meredith had polished just yesterday. "Here, Blackwell's new housekeeper has revolutionized this place," said a gray-haired woman to her companion. "Everything runs like clockwork now." Meredith suppressed a smile. Few realized she was that housekeeper. Having risen from junior maid to head of household staff through relentless efficiency and attention to detail, the daughter of Nigerian immigrants, she had put herself through community college while cleaning houses, eventually landing the position at Thornwood. As Meredith approached the library, voices spilled out from the half-open door. "Blackwell pays his staff too much," said a man's voice, tinged with whiskey. "That housekeeper especially. What's her name?" "The African woman, Merita," another voice applied. "She's American, Jackson." "Whatever. My point is, why pay premium for manual labor? It's not like it takes brains to dust a shelf." Meredith froze, her hand on the doorknob. The speaker was Jackson Reed, a venture capitalist known for his cutting investments and equally cutting remarks. She'd served him at 3 previous events. "I met her earlier," a woman interjected. "She seemed quite intelligent." "They all seem that way until you really talk to them." Jackson laughed. "Trust me, I've funded enough startups to know who's got potential and who's just going to be picking up after the winners for life." Blood rushed to Meredith's cheeks. She considered walking away, but something in her shifted. She pushed open the door and entered with her head high. "Fresh champagne," she announced, her voice steady despite the hammering in her chest. Conversation halted. Jackson Reed, leaning against a bookshelf, straightened slightly. Recognition flickered across his face, followed by a smirk. "Perfect timing," he said, taking a glass without looking at her. Then, "To the room. As I was saying about the help. The group's uncomfortable laughter cut Meredith more deeply than outright cruelty. She completed her service and left, but something had cracked inside her, not just pride, but the acceptance of her position in this world. That night, after the guests departed and she'd supervised the cleaning, Meredith sat at her small desk in the staff quarters. Her business management textbook lay open beside a stack of certification courses she'd completed. On her laptop screen, a half-finished business plan for an eco-friendly cleaning service waited. Picking up after the winners, she whispered to herself, fingers hovering over the keyboard. She thought of her parents who had arrived in America with nothing, their degrees from Nigeria unrecognized, starting over in their 40s. By dawn, Meredith had finished her business plan and drafted her resignation letter. Jackson Reed had inadvertently given her something valuable after all the final push. She needed to bet on herself. Seeds of ambition. Storefront Meredith leased in Stamford wasn't much, a narrow space wedged between a tailor and a bookshop, but it was hers. 6 months had passed since she'd walked away from Thornwood, cashing out her modest savings and taking a small business loan that made her accountant friend Priya wince. "Crystal clear," read the elegant sign above the door, the logo featuring a sparkling water droplet. Inside, Meredith arranged bottles of her handmade cleaning solutions recipes perfected during late nights in her apartment kitchen, combining effective cleaning power with essential oils and plant-based ingredients. "You're really doing this," Priya said, leaning against the freshly painted counter. "From head housekeeper to entrepreneur in half a year." Meredith adjusted the display of microfiber cloths. "I should have done it sooner. All those years maintaining other people's dreams instead of building my own." What set Crystal Clear apart wasn't just eco-friendly products. Meredith had developed a comprehensive cleaning system based on her years managing household staff for the ultra-wealthy. Every client received a personalized assessment, with services tailored to their specific needs and a dedicated team trained in her methods. Her first clients came through references from former colleagues' household, the staff who'd witnessed her work ethic at Thornwood and other estates. Within weeks, word spread among a network of personal assistants and estate managers about the new service that combined the thoroughness of old-world housekeeping with modern, sustainable practices. One evening, as Meredith locked up the shop, her phone rang. The caller ID showed Eleanor Vaughan, the social secretary for several prominent Greenwich families. "Meredith, darling," Eleanor's voice crackled through the speaker. "I'm in a terrible bind. The Harrisons are hosting a dinner tomorrow for 15, and their regular service cancelled. Could your team possibly help?" The Harrisons, neighbors to Thornwood Estate, people who'd seen her in uniform, carrying trays. "We usually require more notice," Meredith began, then stopped herself. This was exactly the opportunity she needed to return not as staff, but as a business owner. "We'll be there," she decided. "Send me the details." That night, Meredith barely slept, preparing checklists and briefing a small team, 3 former housekeepers and a butler she'd recruited from her professional network, all seeking better wages and more respect than traditional household positions offered. The Harrison estate, though smaller than Thornwood, exuded the same aura of generational wealth. Meredith arrived early, dressed in a tailored charcoal suit with the crystal-clear logo discreetly embroidered on the lapel. "You're the owner?" Mrs. Harrison asked, surprise evident in her tone as she took in Meredith's professional attire. "Yes, I oversee all premium clients personally," Meredith replied with practiced confidence, despite the nervous flutter in her stomach. As the team worked, transforming the space for the evening's event, Meredith noticed Mrs. Harrison watching with increasing approval. The imported linens were pressed to perfection, silver polished to a mirror shine, and every surface treated with Crystal Clear's signature products, leaving behind a subtle lavender citrus scent rather than harsh chemicals. "This is exceptional," Mrs. Harrison said as the final touches were completed. "Better than our regular service, honestly." When the first guests arrived, Meredith was supervising from a distance when she spotted a familiar face, Victoria Pierce, who had been present in the library during Jackson Reed's comments at Thornwood. Victoria did a double take, then approached with a curious smile. "Meredith, from Yes, though I'm with Crystal Clear now," Meredith replied, handing Victoria her business card. "My company." Victoria's eyebrows rose as she examined the elegant card. "Your company? That's quite a change." "Sometimes we need a push to pursue our true calling," Meredith said evenly. The evening proceeded flawlessly, and as guests departed, several requested Crystal Clear's information. By the following week, Meredith's calendar was filled with appointments from Greenwich's elite, curious about the service that had impressed the discerning Harrisons. 3 months later, Crystal Clear had expanded to a team of 15, serving the homes of bankers, lawyers, and corporate executives across Fairfield County. Meredith hired a shop manager to handle retail operations while she focused on growing the service business, developing training protocols and quality standards that set her company apart. On a crisp autumn afternoon, as Meredith reviewed applications for additional staff, Priya burst into the office, waving a magazine. "You're in Connecticut Business Monthly," she exclaimed, flipping to a feature titled "Cleaning Up: How Meredith Okafor is Disrupting Household Services." The article detailed Crystal Clear's rapid growth and innovative approach, highlighting Meredith's background and vision for transforming an industry often overlooked by entrepreneurs. "They're calling you a visionary," Priya said, grinning. Meredith took the magazine, fingers tracing the photo of herself standing proudly before her growing fleet of branded vehicles. "Not bad for someone who just picks up after winners," she murmured, thinking of Jackson Reed's dismissive words that had once cut so deeply that night. Meredith added a new section to her business plan: national expansion. What had begun as an escape from humiliation was evolving into something far greater, not just a successful local business, but the seeds of an empire built on respect, sustainability, and excellence. Underneath her growing confidence, a small voice whispered a question that made her smile. What would Jackson Reed think if he could see her now? Empire Rising 3 years had transformed Crystal Clear from a local cleaning service into a regional powerhouse. Meredith's office now occupied the entire second floor of a renovated factory building in Stamford's business district, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the harbor. On the wall behind her desk hung the framed Connecticut Business Monthly feature, a reminder of how far she'd come. "The Boston expansion numbers just came in," announced Dominic Torres, her operations director, sliding a tablet across her desk. A former hospitality executive Meredith had lured away from a luxury hotel chain. Dominic brought corporate structure to her growing enterprise. Meredith studied the figures, a smile spreading across her face. 30% above projections for the first quarter. Philadelphia and Washington are performing similarly. "Your training protocols scale beautifully," Dominic replied, "and the premium pricing model is working. Turns out the wealthy will pay significantly more for truly exceptional service." What had begun as a cleaning company had evolved into what industry insiders called domestic experience management, a comprehensive approach to maintaining luxury properties that combined traditional housekeeping with concierge services, property management, and sustainable practices. Crystal Clear's teams didn't just clean, they transformed environments that the company's proprietary products now manufactured in a dedicated. The facility in New Haven had developed a cult following among eco-conscious consumers and were featured in glossy home magazines. The Crystal Clear Academy trained staff in everything from silver polishing to wine cellar management, creating a new class of certified household professionals who commanded salaries once unimaginable in the industry. Meredith glanced at her schedule. "The investor meeting is at 2. "Yes," Dominic confirmed. "Haverford Partners is very interested in funding our national rollout. Venture capital." The irony wasn't lost on Meredith. For years, she'd bootstrapped growth, reinvesting profits and taking only calculated risks. but to truly expand coast to coast she needed significant capital, the kind controlled by people like Jackson Reed. Speaking of whom, Meredith had kept tabs on Reed Ventures through business news. Jackson's firm had been struggling lately, with several high-profile investments failing to deliver promised returns. His once golden reputation had tarnished, though he remained a player in the East Coast financial circles. The meeting with Haverford Partners proceeded smoothly. Led by senior partner Lucinda Way, the firm's representatives were visibly impressed by Crystal Clear's growth metrics and solid fundamentals. Most consumer service businesses we see lack scalability, Lucinda noted, reviewing the projections. But you've created systems that maintain quality across markets. That's rare. We're not selling cleaning, Meredith explained. We're selling trust, consistency, and transformation. Our clients don't want their homes merely maintained, they want them elevated. By meeting's end, Haverford had offered a term sheet for $40 million in growth capital, enough to expand Crystal Clear to 15 additional markets over 2 years. The valuation placed Crystal Clear at over $200 million, making Meredith's majority stake worth nearly $150 million on paper. As Meredith signed the preliminary agreement, her phone buzzed with a news alert. She ignored it until the investors departed, then checked the notification. Reed Ventures under investigation for financial irregularities. The article detailed allegations that Jackson Reed had misrepresented fund performance to investors and used company resources for personal expenses. The SEC was investigating, and several limited partners were withdrawing their capital. Everything okay? Asked Priya, now Crystal Clear's CFO. Noticing Meredith's intense focus on her phone. Just watching karma at work, Meredith replied, showing her the headline. Later that evening, at Crystal Clear's annual staff appreciation gala held at the Four Seasons and attended by over 200 employees, took the stage to announce the investment deal and expansion plans. 5 years ago, I was told people like us would always be picking up after the winners, she told the crowd, many of whom had similar backgrounds to her own. First-generation college graduates, people who'd worked in service roles with little recognition. Today, I look out at this room and see nothing but winners. The applause was deafening, punctuated by cheers and a few tears from longtime team members who'd been with her from the beginning. After the celebration, Meredith found herself alone on the hotel's terrace, contemplating the twinkling lights of the city below. Her company was now valued higher than many of the businesses owned by people she'd once served conneps to. The thought brought not bitterness but a profound satisfaction. Her phone rang. Her real estate agent Giselle. Meredith, you won't believe what just hit the market, Giselle said without preamble. Thornwood Estate. Meredith's breath caught. Thornwood, Theodore Blackwell is selling. Not exactly. The property's been transferred to a bank consortium. Word is Blackwell overextended himself investing with some fund that's under investigation. They're liquidating his assets. Reed Ventures. It had to be. Theodore Blackwell had been one of Jackson Reed's earliest backers and most loyal investors. What's the asking price? Meredith asked, her mind racing. When Giselle named the figure, steep but not impossible with her new funding, Meredith felt a strange sense of destiny. The mansion where she'd been humiliated, where she'd scrubbed floors and polished silver, could be hers. Schedule a viewing, she decided, tomorrow if possible. As she ended the call, Meredith looked out at the city lights once more, seeing not just the present but a future taking shape with perfect symmetry. Crystal Clear needed a flagship location, a showpiece demonstrating the company's vision and values. What better place than Thornwood Estate? Not as a trophy of revenge, but as the ultimate testament to transformation, just like the transformation she'd undergone herself. From invisible servant to industry pioneer, the circle was nearly complete. Asterisk, the fall of Thornwood. Willing through Thornwood Estate as a potential buyer rather than a housekeeper gave Meredith a surreal sense of déjà vu. The grand foyer where she'd once greeted guests, the kitchen where she'd directed staff, the library where Jackson Reed had dismissed her all appeared simultaneously familiar and foreign. The property needs considerable updating, Giselle explained as they toured the mansion. Mr. Blackwell's financial difficulties meant deferred maintenance for the past year. Meredith noticed the signs immediately: water damage in the east wing ceiling, tarnished fixtures, gardens overgrown with weeds. The mansion had lost its luster without proper care. It felt like a metaphor. The bank consortium is motivated to sell quickly, Giselle continued. They're willing to entertain offers below asking. In the main sitting room, Meredith ran her fingers along the marble mantelpiece she'd once dusted daily. What happened to the staff? Let go months ago. Mr. Blackwell replaced them with a budget service before abandoning the property entirely. The business case for purchasing Thornwood was compelling. Located halfway between New York and Boston, it could serve as Crystal Clear's East Coast headquarters and showcase facility. The expansive grounds offered space for the training academy Meredith had envisioned, where staff could perfect their craft in an actual luxury setting. I'd like to make an offer, Meredith decided. Contingent on inspection, of course. As they left the property, Meredith noticed a familiar Mercedes parked across the street. Inside sat Jackson Reed, watching the estate with a haunted expression. Their eyes met briefly before he started his car and drove away. Later that week, financial news reported that Reed Ventures was dissolving amid mounting legal troubles. Jackson Reed had allegedly commingled client funds with personal accounts and falsified returns. Several prominent clients, including Theodore Blackwell, had lost millions. When Meredith's offer for Thornwood was accepted, she felt not triumph but a sense of responsibility. This wasn't just a business acquisition or personal vindication, it was a chance to restore something beautiful that had fallen into disrepair through mismanagement and neglect. Over the next 6 months, Meredith poured resources into renovating Thornwood. The mansion's historical elements were preserved and enhanced, while infrastructure was modernized with sustainable systems. The East Wing became executive offices, the carriage house transformed into a product development lab, and the gardens were reimagined with organic principles throughout the process. Meredith found herself thinking of her parents, who had worked as janitors when they first arrived in America. They hadn't lived to see her success, but she felt their presence in every decision, every moment of creating something meaningful from what others had discarded. The transformation of Thornwood paralleled the meteoric rise of Crystal Clear, which now operated in 23 markets with over 2,000 employees. Industry publications heralded Meredith's approach as revolutionary, elevating domestic work from servitude to skilled profession, creating career paths in an industry long associated with low wages and little respect. On the evening before the official opening of Crystal Clear's headquarters at Thornwood Estate, Meredith stood alone in the renovated library. The room where Jackson Reed had once belittled her now housed a collection of business and leadership books, including several featuring Crystal Clear as a case study. Full circle, she whispered to herself, surveying what she had built. Full circle, a gala celebrating Crystal Clear's new headquarters brought together clients, investors, and business leaders from across the country. Thornwood Estate, once a symbol of inherited privilege, now represented innovation and transformation. Meredith stood at the entrance of the ballroom, greeting guests in a custom midnight blue gown. At 42, she carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had built something meaningful entirely on her own terms. "The place looks spectacular," commented Lucinda Way of Haverford Partners, now a board member. "Hard to believe it's the same property." "Everything can be transformed with the right care," Meredith replied, a philosophy that had become her company's unofficial motto. As the evening progressed, Meredith circulated among guests, many of whom were former clients from her housekeeping days, now business associates who treated her as a peer rather than service staff. The shift in dynamics wasn't lost on her, though she noted some still seemed uncomfortable with the role reversal. Near the champagne fountain, she spotted a face she hadn't expected to see. Jackson Reed stood awkwardly at the periphery of a conversation group, looking thinner and grayer than when she'd last glimpsed him. According to Business News, he'd avoided criminal charges but faced numerous civil suits and professional disgrace. "Who invited him?" Dominic whispered, appearing at her side. "I did," Meredith admitted. "His assistant reached out. Apparently, he's trying to rebuild connections." Dominic raised an eyebrow. "Brave of him to show up, or desperate," Meredith replied, excusing herself to approach Jackson directly. He noticed her coming and straightened his posture, attempting a shadow of his former confidence. "Meredith, congratulations on all this. It's impressive." "Thank you, Jackson," she said, maintaining professional courtesy despite the history between them. "I'm surprised you came." "I almost didn't," he admitted, glancing around at former colleagues who now avoided his gaze. "But I wanted to see what you've done with the place. It's remarkable." An awkward silence fell between them, the venture capitalist who had fallen from grace and the housekeeper who had built an empire. "I owe you an apology," Jackson finally said, his voice low. "What I said that night, it was ignorant and cruel." Meredith studied his face, searching for sincerity and finding what appeared to be genuine regret. "We all say things we regret. In my case, I also did things I regret," he replied with a bitter smile. "Turns out I wasn't one of the winners after all." A server approached with a tray of champagne. Meredith noticed it was Hector, one of her first employees, now the company's hospitality director. "Thank you, Hector," she said warmly, taking 2 glasses and offering one to Jackson. He accepted hesitantly. "The irony isn't lost on me." "Life is full of ironies," Meredith agreed. "But I didn't invite you here to humiliate you, Jackson. That's not what this is about." "What is it about?" "Then," Meredith considered the question seriously. "Restoration, I think. Taking what was broken and making it whole again. Thornwood needed someone who understood its value and not just its price." Jackson nodded slowly, looking around the transformed space. "And what about me? Am I being restored to?" "That's entirely up to you," Meredith replied. "But if you're serious about rebuilding, Crystal Clear is launching a foundation to support entrepreneurship in underserved communities. We need advisors with financial expertise, even those who've learned from failure." His eyes widened slightly at the unexpected opening. "You'd trust me with that?" "Trust is earned," Meredith said firmly. "But everyone deserves a chance to transform." As she moved away to continue greeting guests, Meredith felt a profound sense of completion. The circle that began with humiliation had led not to revenge but to something far more powerful, the ability to extend opportunity rather than withhold it, to transform lives rather than merely improve spaces. Later that night, after the guests had departed, Meredith walked alone through the quiet halls of Thornwood. In the grand foyer, a portrait had been installed, not of her, but of her parents in their youth, standing proudly before the small cleaning business they'd started in a Newark basement decades ago. "We did it," she whispered to their smiling faces. Outside, dawn was breaking over the grounds of what was now Crystal Clear's headquarters. Staff would soon arrive to begin the day's work, each one following paths. Meredith had created paths of dignity, opportunity, and possibility in an industry once defined by invisibility. From dust to dynasty, from servant to CEO, Meredith Okafor had rewritten not just her own story but the narrative of an entire industry. And Thornwood Estate, once a symbol of her humiliation, now stood as a monument to the transformative power of vision, perseverance, and the courage to bet on oneself when no one else would. The mansion that had once been her workplace was now her legacy, not an ending, but a foundation for what was yet to come.